What is the root cause of Looksmaxxing? It's exploded in popularity over the past few years, but we still don't have a good explanation for why this behavior developed. There's its shadowy origins on incel forums and its all-encompassing nihilism. But what if I told you that Looksmaxxing isn't solely a human phenomenon? This exact adaptation has appeared before, in a utopian experiment on mice. This mouse civilization and its downfall explains not just the root cause of Looksmaxxing, but why Looksmaxxing could lead to a massive population collapse. In 1968, researcher John Calhoun built a giant utopia for mice. He planned to study overpopulation by creating a paradise for these mice, giving them effectively infinite resources and a massive shelter. This was the grand experiment called Universe 25, the 25th large enclosure Calhoun had studied. Calhoun set 8 mice loose in this utopian environment and began to observe. There was a period of 104 days before the first litter, and this constitutes Phase A. But as soon as the first children of Universe 25 were born, the colony entered Phase B, explosive growth. In this paradise, the mice were fruitful and multiplied, and they spread across Universe 25. At first, all seemed normal. The population of mice rocketed up past 800 in just under a year. They were well on their way to the ultimate population cap of 3,840, where there would be more mice than shelter. They established nests, social hierarchies, and territories, as a healthy colony should. And due to the excess of resources, there were 3 times more young mice than their older counterparts, far exceeding how many would appear in nature. But then something strange happened. The population growth slowed, but not because of violence or disease. The mice began to fail at basic social behaviors. With the population climbing past 1,000 mice, social contact had become constant and inescapable. Mice were exposed to one another far more frequently than would ever occur in nature. Under this pressure, their social structure began to break down. Calhoun says the heightened contact rate culminates in brevity and incompleteness of response and finally blocks expression of behaviors. In essence, the frequency of social interactions prevents them from being complete or effective, meaning that the young mice never learn complex behaviors, and the mature mice even lose the ability to perform them. Some mice withdrew from interaction almost entirely. The low-status males engaged in erratic aggression, not against high-status mice for their resources, but against each other. These fights seemingly had no goal, like taking territory or impressing a mate, as neither had any resources to take. More complex social behaviors that normally develop through stable interaction failed to appear. Maternal behavior was especially affected. Females became erratic or indifferent toward their offspring. Some abandoned their young entirely, while others failed to protect them. Infant mortality rose sharply, despite the abundant resources. The mice were not deprived of space or food, but psychological distance. Continuous interaction overwhelmed the social structures that normally regulate behavior. On day 560, the population stopped increasing altogether. Very few infants survived past weaning, and then eventually none at all. The amount of deaths matched the amount of births, and to make the situation worse, the female mice stopped conceiving entirely. But the maladaptions didn't stop with the failing maternal behavior. A bizarre social archetype emerged in this failing civilization. They were the young male mice Calhoun called the beautiful ones. They never engaged in sexual approaches towards females, and they never engaged in fighting, and so they had no wound or scar tissue. Thus, their pelage remained in excellent condition. Their behavioral repertoire became largely confined to eating, drinking, sleeping, and grooming, none of which carried any social implications beyond that represented by contiguity of bodies. Most of the last half of the population born in the 16-cell universe were fully or largely like these non-producing females and these beautiful ones. As the more functional mice began to enter old age, the cohort of beautiful ones and non-reproducing females were the only mice remaining fertile. Since they failed to develop the faculties to reproduce, the mouse utopia entered a death spiral. No new mice were born, and the population collapsed. Had the researchers not stopped the experiment early, the final mouse would have died on day 1780. The similarities between the beautiful ones and Looksmaxxers are pretty obvious, so I'll just briefly outline them. First, both the mice and Looksmaxxers are at one point outside or at the bottom of the social hierarchy. Secondly, both do not physically fight or compete for status in an alpha sort of way. And finally, both do not participate in fruitful reproduction, except in rare cases. But can Universe 25 really provide us with an understanding of why humans have adopted this looksmaxxing behavior? If so, the obvious hypothesis is overpopulation. Despite being able to physically support over 3,000 mice, at a capacity of 2,000, Universe 25 became overcrowded to the point where the status hierarchy dissolved under the population density. This is why Calhoun's work often gets discarded as neo-Malthusianism, but that's not the conclusion Calhoun came to. If you read Calhoun's previous paper, he describes a strange behavior from the mice called a behavioral sink. In this other experiment, it was a similar mouse utopia, but featuring a limited amount of feeding spaces. Mice would tend to cluster in disproportionate amounts at certain feeding locations and all but ignore others. Calhoun noted that this basic physical need became pathologically tied to the mouse socializing, so much so that they wouldn't eat when they were alone. As such, the quantity of social interactions grew to an enormous amount in this enclosure, far beyond what would ever happen in nature. This is the same social failure from Phase C of Universe 25. The frequency and low quality of these interactions caused the mice to either fail to perform or never learn complex social behaviors. The same clustering happened in Universe 25. If you look at this chart, you can see the mice clustering towards the bottom left section of the universe and underpopulating the top right. This bizarre distribution and the subsequent social stress is what Calhoun concludes causes the rampant socialization problems. But how does this apply to the young men of today? Aren't we all atomized and isolated, so we don't have this immense amount of social interactions? Since we're alone in our bedrooms at our gaming PCs, wouldn't social stress not be a possible reason for the looksmaxxing behavior? What if I told you that being alone doesn't mean you're not socializing? We may not be physically socializing, but we're socializing more than any other time in human history. The phone, internet, and social media in particular register in your brain a very similar way to if you were truly interacting with the people on the screen. These technologies collapse social distance and make social withdrawal near impossible, the same way Universe 25 did. No matter if you live deep in the woods, you can still live in a crowded enclosure. From Marshall McLuhan in Understanding Media, in the electric age, our central nervous system is technologically extended to involve us in the whole of mankind and to incorporate the whole of mankind in us. The globe is no more than a village. Electric speed in bringing all social and political function together in a sudden implosion has heightened human awareness to an intense degree. In other words, your body can't tell the difference between an overcrowded enclosure and your social media feed. The density and the subsequent social interactions are crushing, even if there are no physical bodies surrounding you. This point is critical to understand if you're going to survive the modern age. You don't look at the phone screen, computer monitor, or laptop. You look through them. Our senses are extended through the screen. These online social interactions are as real as talking to someone in real life, and because of their digital quality, they can come at you way faster and way denser than you could ever experience in nature. Social stress is as omnipresent in modern man as it is in the mice of Universe 25, and looksmaxxing is just one of the maladaptions we're seeing emerge. So does this mean we're doomed to suffer the same experimental conclusion? Fertility is collapsing. We are not replacing our population. For the first time in industrial civilization, the Western world's population pyramid has inverted. So are we truly entering a population death spiral? Not necessarily, because humans are a little different from mice. Despite existing under the same conditions and pressure, we have the agency to deal with it differently. Despite someone like Clavicular nearly castrating himself in his journey to ultimate beauty, he can eventually settle down with a girl whenever his fame ebbs and hopefully have a fruitful relationship. A human looksmaxxer can always choose to merge into normal institutions, traditions, and social structures, and he's generally better off for his looksmaxxing journey than he would be otherwise. It's difficult due to the neurosis of looksmaxxing, but unlike the mice, the humans always have a choice. The criticism of looksmaxxing often ends up as a wanton disavowal of self-improvement. There's this idea that looksmaxxing produces an artificial, undeserved beauty and should be maligned, but that's not true. The real problem is that the self-improvement is so focused on vanity instead of a holistic improvement of these guys' lives. To the aspiring looksmaxxers out there, you should definitely go to the gym and eat well and try to look good, but you can move through the status hierarchy more effectively by cultivating other status markers like money, accomplishments, or social circle. Even if you decide to go all in on looksmaxxing, once you've achieved the level of social acceptance you're looking for, it's important to merge into normal institutions and traditions. If you continue to reject the social hierarchy while simultaneously putting all your effort into conquering it, you end up like the classic pickup artists of the mid-2000s. Sad, old, and alone. And if this happens on a generational scale, we could end up in a death spiral. But looksmaxxing isn't the problem here. The true danger of this age is man allowing his environment to decide what he becomes. The way forward is to choose.